in the initial parts of the book you mentioned, and rightly so, that there was a sense of naivety in the last decade or so that the world is celebrating India's rise, and the world is a cheerleader as we become 4 and 5 and $10 trillion. You said no one is going to be celebrating the rise. In fact, I suggest the book rightly assesses that there is going to be a resistance coming in, there is going to be dampeners. And you have also mentioned the use of various instruments to create instabilities, from social media to cyber to mobilizations of irrational constituencies, non-state actors. And you do say that perhaps India may not be subdued in this manner, but Mr. Sood, all around us, our neighbors are facing some of these non-state actors and mobilizations and revolutions and protests that have created instability in our region. So my question to you is, do you think one of the ways India's rise could be curtailed is by keeping its periphery in turmoil?
Very good question. Can you hear me? America operates through proxies. And Nepal and Bangladesh could be proxies. The idea is not to conquer us. The idea is to keep us engaged in things that would drain us economically, financially, politically, marginalize you. And then you have the other chap on the left and who periodically threatens you with all sorts of things. So we have this situation where the West is unable to accept that there could be an economic power, and looking ahead, an economic, sorry for that. Okay. We could have a situation where India rises sufficiently. It's not going to happen tomorrow, it's not going to happen the day after. It's going to take a long time. There are lots of obstacles to us, and we have to overcome all those obstacles on our own. And nobody is going to come to help you. Nobody wants to help you. So we have to do all this ourselves. It will take time. So therefore, they are playing for the future. Keep these guys tied down in their own little sphere, while we tackle China separately. So either we join China, join the United States to take on China, or we just lie low.
Or remain out of the way.
Yeah, get out of the way.
So actually this is a good segue to my second question, which is perhaps even more direct. You have cited someone else in this book while saying that we will have to manage a healthy relationship with America. But you also, in the closing parts of the book, hinted at us India, Russia, China partnership, the mellowing down of ties. Where are we? So I mean, where is Vikram Sood's worldview? If we have to have some partner for the future, is it the American sphere or is it China's world?
To my mind, I think we will have to have better neighborly relations with your neighbor. You cannot do without it. The United States is lucky it has Mexico and Canada to deal with. But unless what I think we need is 3 statesmen living at the same time. And if you look at the map, it's Arctic, Russia, China, India, Indian Ocean. All the resources that we need, all the markets that you need, all the manufacturing that you need is here.
Very interesting. So the continental neighbors is perhaps the priority for India in the days ahead.
Yes.
Right.
That is what I'm trying to say. That doesn't mean that we should not have good relations with the United States, but we're not going to be able to depend on them.
Okay, so I think this is a great point of debate because Sanjeev Sanyal is going to talk about the maritime neighbors and the importance of that. But keep that, hold that thought, Sanjeev, and it's a wonderful start to this conversation. Mr. Sood, let me just close this initial segment with you by asking you one question. Media, you mentioned media in the book quite head on, and I'm not going into what you've said here, but it generally is a pessimistic outlook on the contribution of Indian media to the Indian narrative building, Indian imagination, Indian representation, Indian projection. Because we have Miss Irani here, I would say perhaps we are looking at news media and not the entirety of media. Because one of India's most successful global stories has been Miss Smriti Irani and the Indian storytelling and our television, cinemas, and of course the digital medium. So how do you balance, square up this conversation on media? Our news media may be reporting from Western agencies, but our cultural media has done a yeoman service in taking India to the world.
No, I don't disagree with what you're saying. My thrust was the political, military aspects and the intelligence aspects, not so much the cultural. My brain ticks that way. So I was saying that unless your voice is heard there, you should be sending your voice first, not as a reaction to what others are saying. But we should be out there first. Our story should go first. Not otherwise it becomes a rejoinder.
Mm-hmm. So we are reactive, not necessarily propositional.
Yes.
In setting the terms of engagement.
Let's take Sindoor. Why didn't we come out with our story first? We were reacting. So that you lost points there, no? So when you move into a situation, when we are dealing in a situation like this, I think we should have everybody involved. This is what you're supposed to be doing. I want this story written out. If A doesn't happen, B happens, then this is the story you will plug in. You know, because otherwise, surely the armed forces didn't think of doing all this on the 22nd of April. They must have thought of this earlier. I'm sure they war-gamed it. They worked it out. In case there is an attack, what do we do?
So are we investing in building the narrative even as we build our tactical and strategic postures?
Yes,
I think that's the point you're making.
We have to go alongside.
Excellent. Mr. Jayapanda, you are very, very interested and involved and engaged in shaping India's digital architecture from a very long time, from private member bills that you had authored in Parliament more than a decade ago to looking at the privacy laws and the data protection laws and the big question of sovereign control over the internet and technologies. This book deals a lot with the possibilities, both positive and I think you used the word frenemy, if I remember correctly, Mr. Sood, in the book you used the word frenemy, technology as a frenemy. Yeah. So, Mr. Jayapanda, technology as a frenemy, and where are we on that spectrum today? Are we more in control of technology, or do we need to do much more to control technology, or do we even really need to think in those terms by creating our own and building our own platform, something the book speaks about as well?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd like to start by congratulating Mr. Sood for a phenomenal third act. And it is indeed a trilogy which all works together. For the first two books to have laid the groundwork for an understanding of how intelligence works and how narrative settings work, and then to move on to how great powers pursue power and how the deep state essentially works. So it's really a great understanding. But before coming to the technology question, I think it's important to understand that there is a dichotomy when we think of geopolitics in today's age. On the one hand, the more things change, they remain the same. I want to put this in context. I've often referred to that if you look at some of the political and economic debates in India today between government and opposition, for instance, you look back and listen to the debates or the arguments between Julius Caesar and Cato the Younger. It's as if you're reading today's news. Okay? Remember, it was only 3 generations ago when nuclear power was first established that people thought that was such a turning point. It is indeed a very big inflection point. That geopolitics as humanity knew it has changed forever. it was only one generation ago when people said end of history, that Western liberalism has won. These things are important. Nuclear power can indeed be a complete game changer. But what was written in the Arthashastra, or what was written by Sun Tzu or Machiavelli, continues to be almost as relevant today as it was when they were written. And to understand geopolitics and power at a global scale in the current era, I would like to compliment Mr. Sood for educating at least me and many others and getting us to understand that. So that brings me to the technology question. Yes, technology makes a huge difference. But it was only 158 years ago that just by passing around chapatis, we could foster a revolution. Okay? And today you can do that much faster. I mean, that took a few days or a few weeks to happen. Today you can, in minutes, have a flash mob get together. You're talking about the neighborhood. I think it's important because that's how flash mobs are organized. That's how Gen Z is being provoked. But it isn't just in the last 2 years that it happened in our neighborhood. Since Mr. Sood mentioned Ukraine, have we forgotten the Orange Revolution? 15 years ago.
Arab Spring.
Arab Spring. So my point is, technology has the power to dramatically change the game. But the game is essentially the same that it has always been.
I think that was the first book, the unending game or the never-ending game in some
Right.
sense.
So, and that's why this trilogy is important to understand. So, yes, indeed, we have this huge demographic advantage of hundreds of millions of technological minds, and yet we don't yet have a world-conquering either an app or a platform.
A digital
We are beginning to get there. A Zoho, for instance, has panicked many in the Western world. And it makes sense that our leadership is championing Indian-made products, Indian-made platforms. Now, we have one issue that we need to deal with. The world has never seen such a diverse, such a vast democracy that we have. Never. This is the largest, most diverse in the history of humankind. And if we compare to our eastern neighbor, the leader needs to carry 4 other people out of the top 9 to run that country. Our leader needs to carry 400 million. Now, this makes technology both a tremendous tool.
Correct. Of carrying them along.
Yes. And also a tremendous challenge. As we are seeing you can see this in the repeated attempts to provoke a Gen Z on the streets kind of thing that we are seeing in our neighborhood. So we have some ways to go to reach a level where, China, for instance, uses technology much more as a tool of control, much less as a threat, because they've barricaded themselves. They've created a walled garden, the largest in the world.
The great fireball of China.
Exactly.
Right?
And so we aren't anywhere there, but we aren't very weak either. We can see that we need to leverage the power of technology much more and ensure against the threats that it poses to our security and to our geopolitical ambitions. I think the roadmap is visible, but we have a lot of work to do.
Mr. Panda, you've been part of multiple parliamentary exchanges, both in the West and in the East, from Japan to the US. You've invested in meeting your counterparts, political leaders across the world. In your assessment today, as we move from, say, 4 trillion to 10 trillion by 2035, middle of the next decade, where do our real interests lie? Which part of the world? I mean, of course, India first, but India would require, perhaps need-based, perhaps pragmatic, perhaps even temporary relationships with a number of actors. Who are those 2 or 3 geographies that are important for us today?
So to take the previous conversation a little forward, and the book also talks about how the other major powers are trying to nudge India in a way that it doesn't walk the we are walking a tripwire. We are walking a fine edge of various compulsions. And to take forward what Mr. Sood said a little bit earlier, if some people think that aligning with America to take on China is the answer, don't forget Henry Kissinger, who said, to be enemies with America is dangerous, but to be friends is positively fatal. Now, and he was America's preeminent diplomat of the modern era. Now, we can't take hard and fast calls at this point. Everybody is a frenemy.
So agile, nimble, and
everybody is a frenemy. Now, dealing with China has its own challenges. Aligning with, benefiting from petroleum products from Russia has its benefits and has its challenges. Now, we can't take a hard and fast call now for many decades to come. Mm-hmm. It has to be, every few months at a time, you have to assess the situation and keep going. So I think considering the constraints we have, we are doing a reasonably good job. We have many things that we can do better, and we will. Our capacities are being built up. You mentioned about, I've been on about 80 different all-party delegations all over the world, led about 50 of them. I have led one of the Operation Sindoor outreaches. I agree. I think we should have preempted the narrative. But I think it all comes down to one thing, that you're right, that nobody would want India to necessarily gain the clout that it is gaining as we cross the number of trillions in our size of GDP. It doesn't mean they don't want us to grow. They just want us to grow in a manner
growth without influence.
That doesn't disrupt. Yeah, it's a market that everybody covets. It's not a rising power that everybody welcomes.
Excellent. Mr. Sood, you wanted to say something?
Add on to what Jay is saying. They want a pliable system, a market, a resource. Don't want this Atmanirbhar and all that. That is a positive no-no.
Basically, strategic autonomy is not necessarily celebrated anywhere. Yeah. Strategic dependency is what the world really wants.
That's what they want.
Okay. Sanjeev, many instruments are used for influencing the future, influencing global power plays. The latest one seems to be tariff, right? So I thought I'll come to you. Now, how do you deal with and respond to tariff? What is this new quiver, new arrow in the quiver, the tariff quiver, and how do countries respond to tariff?
So I think the tariff thing has to be seen in the same context of what was just discussed by Mr. Sood and Mr. Panda, which is that we've got to think about it in terms of the fact that nobody actually wants you to succeed and take over. They are happy with you to become a little bit richer, a little bit of a bigger market for their products, but certainly not the Eastern ascent, phenomena that threatens the cake, the way the cake was being cut up. Now, in this context, let me say that we are not even unique in this. Since we have now some pretensions of becoming a world power by the end of the decade, end of next decade, whatever you please, then let us be very clear that whenever this change happened, whoever sort of became the great power and became accepted as such had to fight their way there. So let's look through the last several hundreds of years of history. For the British to become a serious world power, they not only had to get past Spain, they also had to defeat Napoleon. For the Russians to become a great power, they had to hold their own in Crimea against both the French and the British. For the Germans to emerge, they had to win the Franco-Prussian Wars. For Japan, they had to defeat Russia in 1905. America had to win 2 world wars. China had to hold their own against America in Korea and then in Vietnam. Tariff wars, we're getting it cheap. So of course, things may get much nastier, but if this is all that we have to put up with for the next few years, and of course, we don't know if we'll get lucky with the Supreme Court of the US, but assuming we don't, we should be prepared mentally that this space will have to be taken in some fashion.
Now, no one is going to give it to you.
Nobody's going to give it to us. Now, hopefully we don't actually have to fight a war, but a tariff war should be considered part of the journey.
Of course.
Yeah, and information wars and many other things that will be played along with us. Whether our neighborhood is used to box us in, whether and there is a section here on, let me remember what the exact term Mr. Sood used, which is subversion of the mind. That's the one. There will be many attempts using artificial intelligence, social media, various complicit groups inside India whose political affiliation, interests may lie in causing turbulence. So, in all of this, we should be very clear that this will not be handed to us in a clean, neat way. In every single one
There's no handover of the baton.
There is no handover of the baton. Nobody is particularly happy about the fact that we are rising. People may wish us well to the extent that you have removed poverty and so on. But beyond that, when it really comes to real power in the game, then be very, very clear that you have to push your way and make space. Now, this has to be done carefully. If you go around pushing around too much, that people will gang up against you, or at the end, they are still bigger boys than you who will trample you. On the other hand, if you don't push around a little bit at least and make space, then, even past powers will push you around. So this is a game that we have to play, but we have to be willing to play it.
So let me, since you mentioned subversion of the mind, and you mentioned, and this book really deals about, the self-description of who we are. Are we in 21st century India beginning to describe ourselves more clearly and with more lucidity?
Yes, in a sense, yes. You see, we bought in after independence. What happens when countries usually become independent? They tend, at least, especially in the beginning, to have a very strong sense of themselves. I mean, we have become free. They tend to evict from positions of the national conversation people who had been collaborators with the colonial power or whoever occupied them. I mean, for the French, for example, got rid of all the Nazi collaborators and so on very, very quickly, as indeed did the Indonesians and so on. One of the unique things of India is that having become independent, the intellectual class of independent India were not those who necessarily fought for India's independence. A very small number of them were there. Most of those who became India's intellectual class after independence were direct descendants of those who had collaborated with the British. They mostly were already in the system. They knew English better or whatever. And in fact, they were the biggest beneficiaries. All the top bosses left. So these people got promoted up. Now, there was a problem. Because if India had been a great power, and it had been a great nation and from ancient times and so on, and as Nehru had described, nation much suppressed, finding utterance, then their self-image was that they had been traitors. So therefore, what they did is they reformulated, using Marxist language, a vision in which effectively India as a country didn't exist before 1947. This is what, by the way, the colonials were telling us anyway. Now, most countries will throw it out as soon as they became free. For our intellectual class, this actually became a useful prop. So we are a strange country in that, having become independent, we perpetuated all these colonial era tropes. Now, of course, it suited the Nehruvian elite as well, who had, to be fair to them, had participated in the freedom struggle. But it suited them because it meant that now, you see, the nation itself exists because of us. So, of course, there is the father of the nation, but then there can also be Chacha of the nation. You can even have Damad of the nation. So, therefore, you see, what happens here is that it is only now that we are beginning to rediscover our history as a country, a sense of self is being actively built upon. We are actually beginning to rewrite our history textbooks in a way that self-respecting country should have done in 1947 onwards. We are beginning to have these kinds of conversations in a much more active way than we would have had just not so long ago.
No, I'm going to come back to you, Sanjeev, but let me now turn to Smriti Irani. Ma'am, many years ago when he wrote his first book, then when he wrote his second book, now when he wrote his third book, Smriti Irani is like permanent fixture. And seriously, my question here is, and you should be, by the way. So it's also the case with me. Last 16 years, you've been permanent fixture in my life. But my point here is, and in many other Indians' lives, anyone with a television, you've been a fixture in their life as well. But my point here is, spy master and soap opera superstar, a political leader, a politician. What is it that connects Smriti Irani to Vikram Sood? I'm sorry for asking this personal question. I thought I'm going to come to you some questions in the book as well. But this very curious connection.
I think the greatest power games are those that are still undiscovered. So if there is a spy master who has an association with a Smriti Irani, that itself is an example of what Vikram Sood writes in this book, The Subtle Coercion of the Mind. Because it's easy to subvert, it is easy to play to a gallery. What is most difficult is to hold your silence. Mm-hmm. So when you roll out a national strategy, which part of that strategy needs to be in a closet amongst those who are efficient and able to leverage it geopolitically? Which parts of those engagements are just playing to the gallery, very vocal, very loud? Which parts of the game and narrative are created so that attention can be diverted? Which parts of the game are played so that you can usurp resources and control strategic technology? I think those are the conversations that need to be had. For too long, when we look at ourselves, and Mr. Sood has been kind enough to indulge in a certain degree of pragmatism with a young colleague like me. For years, we've had this understanding between us that we both have a habit of speaking truth to power, but also to each other. I disagree when we say in this book that the West is on a path of decline. I do so pragmatically because today we are building our systems on technologies. Who owns that technology? Who owns that enterprise software? Mm-hmm. So truly, there has been a past where economic subjugation means colonizing. Truly, there has been a past where cultural subjugation is by erasing a part of your history. But what is now relevant is to recognize that we have had a geopolitical shift from economic nationalism to digital nationalism. And a part of it is also the cultural appropriation or strategies that you spoke of. Mr. Sanyal made a reference to the Arab Spring. If you look at the roots of that so-called revolution, it did not spring from a desire to turn a whole system around based on the tenets of democracy. It was actually based on a fight between a street vendor and a municipal administrative staff in a marketplace. That's how traders in a marketplace united against an administrative officer, and it became slowly converted into a national movement. That is the power of narratives. That for if such a spring was only reduced to a fight between a street vendor and an officer, it would not have ignited the imagination of people across the world. So if we talk about genuine power games, the first rule of that power game is to not celebrate somebody's decline, but to learn from it. It is not to be gregarious about your expected ascent. It is to pause at that crossroad of history and say, how can I learn from their follies, my mistakes of the past, and create a formidable future? So if you look at the China plan now for 2030, one of the very curious pronouncements is how China will engage culturally around the world, which for some may flummox them, because you may have thought that that country is on a path of digital supremacy. That while everybody is talking about semiconductors in India, they are talking about building a 3-nanometer chip. They are going to put in $70 billion only to build their data centers, knowing well that today the West, when speaking of data centers, is confronted with the reality of shortage of water resources and electricity. They are learning from the mistakes of the West and course correcting every single day. It is not a month or half a quarter in reflection. It is regenerating your resources, reallocating your strategies to build every single day. They pronounced a strategy of Make in China. They fulfilled those ambitions. Now they are pronouncing that in the next 5 years, they will have a cultural imprint across the world. So if you look at the Red Book, that is what was quintessentially spoken of.
There are a few red books, but
Well, ours is in the trash can for some, but I'm of the opinion, I will not quote, as Mr. Panda did, very efficiently. I will look closer to the Godfather, given that I'm sitting next to the master spy. That keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. So I would even read from them. And there is no harm in being practical enough to do that. So why is it that in an era where there are tariff wars, does one of your neighbors pronounce a part of their strategies to be culturally appropriating a part of the globe? What is TikTok all about? That is just another manifestation of a greater plan. So while, yes, we are one of the largest consumption markets in the world, can that be our only strength?
or ambition?
Can that be the only leverage? That is a question I think Mr. Sood's book also helps us understand. So yes, I was there, book 1, book 2, book 3. That's because when he even spoke about the power of narrative being the ultimate goal, what is the narrative that we are creating today? You spoke about, and the book writes about, media from a perspective of politics and military strategy. But if you look at the US, how did they create this impossible picture that they will rescue every American who's distraught? They didn't do it through their normal mediums of newspapers, news channels, radio. They did it through film and craft.
Correct.
They did not do it loudly, they did it subtly. And they made it an ambition for everybody to aspire to that benchmark. So when they are setting the standards and they are setting the benchmarks and they are setting the ambitions, are you running their race? Or are you creating a new platform to compete?
Now, let me ask you 2 short questions. Number 1, your own personal story. And I think it's a very important narrative story. And I've seen some of it personally. If I remember, it was Hamid Karzai who came to Raisina many years ago and said that there were no terrorist attacks in Afghanistan when Kyoki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu was running on television. Everyone was watching the serial. He said this in one of the interactions in Raisina many years ago. I remember it. The second, of course, was you had led a delegation for the Hajj pilgrimage, and at least more recently as minority affairs minister. And when I was in Saudi Arabia around that time, I was told you were literally mobbed in that place, which where people gather for a very particular purpose. But you had a huge reception when you were leading a delegation from India for that particular purpose. Isn't that, in many ways, the power of creating a visual imagination of India?
I think that the fact that I was somebody who is not only a practicing Hindu, but also somebody who did not have a headscarf,
Yeah, correct.
that in itself was a realization that my state can exist in its cultural form with me as a representative without me fitting into a silo that they described apt for me. I went there as a representative, as a minister of my country. There were formulations which were at play where many before me had gone. But how do I, without offending their sensitivities, say India shall position itself on a particular issue of exchange of people without subjugating itself to your norms and stand as equal? So the fact that my gender, the fact that my religion, the fact that I went without a headscarf made me an outlier, did not create a rampage there. In fact, was acceptable. So how much of us, in terms of narrative building, is being built in the shadow of what we expect is acceptable? And how much of that envelope is being pushed by us, irrespective of the norms already set? Now, that being said, the book also mentions the capacity of narratives from a perspective of NGOs and indices. I served as Minister Gender as well. And one of the first issues that we took up was the issue of the Global Hunger Index and the Gender Index, which happened at the World Economic Forum. You were a witness to it. And instead of oscillating between screaming and shouting and playing victim, and instead of utilizing as a conspiracy theory, what we could do within our system in collaboration with our colleagues was to call out the facts that went missing. The fact that Gallup just called 2 people and asked, "Are you hungry?" The fact that the Global Gender Gap Index did not take into account 1.5 million Indian women who are voted into our panchayati system. The fact that the math in itself would have placed India right on the top. Now, those are issues which we did not limit to just conversations and proclamations. From the World Economic Forum for India, I got it in writing, the acceptance that their methodology was wrong. So I think that when you're trying to create a perception, or for that matter, fight a narrative, you have to do it, as Mr. Sood says. You know that there are coercive instruments at play. They know that you're going to be reactive. What they do not expect is you being measured. What they do not possibly expect is that every sentence is also evidenced. So do you then perform your service from a position where they already have psychologically presumed you will position India's case, or do you then engage in a different fashion, for they will never find that formulation in any book as to how to engage with India?
Let me paraphrase your previous intervention, one part of it, which was on, and I'm paraphrasing, and I may be wrong and you can correct me, that perhaps we are over-ebullient in our ascent. We perhaps have to be far more realistic in both the pace as well as the reality of the transformation that is underway. So my question to you was that there was a big famous Chinese line, hide your ambitions and bide your time. Where are we on that formula?
Given the advent of technology, given the fact that Mr. Sood, given his record of service, can describe in a book which is publicly available all the games that were played, how much of it is still hidden? There are men in this audience today who have served with Mr. Sood while he was serving in one of the highest intelligence offices in our country. They are quiet, they are unnamed, you wouldn't even know when to pick one of them through this crowd. So the issue is, there is too much out there in the open, but the great games will be played in silence in the shadows.
Okay.
Behind closed doors.
Behind, Mrs. Gautam, let me turn to you now. I was saving Gautam for the very last intervention in this particular one, and I have a short question for all of you in the second round. But Gautam, your response to the book, and certainly your response. You've been talking about narratives. You've been writing about China. You've been writing about the U.S. Behavior in recent times. How do you assess India's journey now, having read this book, having engaged with Mr. Sood? What are our strengths, and where do we need to pay attention?
So, I think I just want to take Smriti Irani's last example forward. In the book, Mr. Sood has written that the spies are not of the Jason Bourne or Ian Fleming's James Bond variety, but more quiet, invisible people like George Smiley of John Le Carre. And I thought that was a very poetically and very visually alive thing. So we think that, shooting people, dancing, drinking is what spies do. But no, I think it's a very dull, boring, invisible job and tedious. And, there'll be 5 people here who you will not give a second look to, but they are the guys who will determine your intelligence. I think this book, Great Power Games, really is a grand strategy book. It's a new world order, preparation for a new world order book. It brings all the aspects, economy, technology, military, internal security, narratives together and argues what is there, right? Let me put it very elegant. He has put it very elegantly. The only answer in India's national interest and shorn of polite verbiage is to be a hegemon ourselves. He's putting it in the context of China and the US and Russia. So I want to move forward on this. So we have lots of things going for us. Our economy is going fine. All 5 of us, except Mr. Sood, because Mr. Sood is half a generation or one generation before us, we are the people who brought India to a $4 trillion stage from $270 billion. We gave India a growth rate of about 8% nominal, compounded over 30 years. And here we are, and this is what we are now going to hand over to the next generation. If they can continue with this, we are a $30 trillion economy by $20,000 per capita income by the middle of this century. If they increase it by 1 percentage point, we are looking at 50 trillion. So I think the economy momentum is there, the dynamism is all there. So that's one of the reasons why we've been able to do several other strategic things. Second thing, we hear a lot about China, Pakistan, and we look at them as adversaries. Now imagine a world where Pakistan was not our enemy and China was our dear friend. Do you think we would have had this kind of military infrastructure? We would have invested in so much military? We have 2 big enemies on our northern borders. We would have been like Europe. We would have been dependent for security on some outside agency, leaning here, leaning there, waiting for this, Russia here and there. The fact that today, by the way, I think India is the only country in the world that is looking at China in the eye as far as military goes. We are not talking about nuclear, we are not talking about taking the war forward. But eye to eye, I don't think there is a single country in this world that can stand up to China eye to eye, the way we are doing in the Himalaya mountains. Because we have already built a huge military base, we have supported it with an economic base, and where we are now lagging is perhaps on narratives, like Sindoor was a very open, big lesson. As far as narratives go, I think there is life before Sindoor and life after Sindoor. I hope lessons would be learned, that you don't wait for a bureaucracy to trickle down a message, by which time people have run away with the narratives and you are left holding the can. So I think that's a weakness, but that's an easy weakness to go. The other weaknesses are own, which I think Mr. Sood has referred to as the enemy within.
I think there's a book by that name also. And I think our enemies within are more lethal to our growth, our rise, than any enemy outside or any shortcoming, let's say, for resources or technology from the outside. I think this is the enemy within. If we are able to unite our people, let's not even say politically, I'm just saying in sheer grand strategic terms. Let us just say there is one national goal, let us say, call it the hegemon, that India should be a hegemon. Can we converge our politics, our bureaucracy, our judiciary, the state, the people, towards this one notion that we want to be a hegemon? Maybe that will help. And therefore, I see this more of a grand strategy book. That chapter on super spies, by the way, is the best chapter that I like. Unfortunately, it's the shortest chapter. and I think there's a book waiting out there. And for me, it's a great learning because in my writings, I haven't really explored intelligence. And now I certainly will. It's a pillar. It's an infrastructure that supports all the other pillars. And I think the way that you have concluded by putting all of these together, that the future of intelligence here is going to play a very vital role. Now, the second part is, suppose we become a hegemon. We are at 30 trillion, we are a hegemon, we are powerful. What are we going to do with this? Are we going to be crushing other countries like US has done? Are we going to be doing debt trap diplomacy? Are we going to be doing aggression the way China is doing? Or will we be a different power? My sense is, our Swadharma, India's Swadharma, is not made up of putting people down. I think we will have the opportunity to redefine what a great hegemon can do or can be. I feel this, for instance, let's look at one aspect, democracy. And you've talked about it, how it is being influenced through narratives and hard, what's that called, democracy, regime change operations that America has done, a beautiful listing of all the regime changes that happen. Now, what I'm observing, and many people may not like it, is that in the process of attempting to export democracy, while embracing autocrats, there is a reverse osmosis, geopolitical osmosis happening, wherein America is becoming more authoritarian and it is importing those streaks of authoritarianism, smashing its own democracy, imploding itself. I think once we reach that point with the greatest number of people, 1.4, 1.5 billion people, we will have a chance to redefine democracy. We will have to get the chance to redefine what a hegemon can be, can do. And I think this entire talk about global unity, this entire thing about around which international institutions have been set up, I think if India gets there, or let's say when India gets there, we may not be the monopoly hegemon. We will be one of the pillars of the planet. I think we will have a chance to rethink, reshape, and redefine democracy itself.
Okay, and I think that's a fair point. But Sanjay, you wanted to intervene.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, like, the point he's making is that getting the large section of your population, the people, the bureaucracy, the business, everybody, to pull in the same direction is really the game. Now, and to do it over long periods of time with, everybody, and obviously there is continuously internal jealousies and so on, requires, interestingly, that there must be one general sense of, some objective that the nation wants to reach, but also some fear of external pressures. And what I'm trying to say here is, look at the rise of Europe. In 500 years ago, when Europe began to go through the Renaissance and rise, actually it was the least peaceful place on the planet. The Spanish basically honed all their, naval and other skills, and the Portuguese, essentially fighting the Arabs and chasing them out of the Iberian Peninsula. The British and the French basically fought each other all over the planet, and in fact, their conquest of India was actually, at least to start with, it was actually about keeping the French out rather than taking on a colony themselves, and so on and so forth. So the point here is that, the fact that there will be other tensions against us, and the fact occasionally we'll have tariff wars, hopefully nothing much more. But I do think that the ability of India to hold itself together in the face of all of these pressures over very long periods of time, that is what it is the game. And there is nothing inevitable about India's rise either. Let me point out, it's something that we, this generation, will have to do and then pass it on to another generation, which will understand that there is this objective, hegemon or not. So holding these great national efforts in place for long periods of time is something. Some countries, of course, we look at all the successes like China has done in recent times. But do remember that there are plenty of such efforts that have gone awry.
But I would argue that in recent times, we have started setting ourselves certain longer term goals. So I think that Viksit Bharat goal 2047 may precisely be that big, that,
yes.
The big ticket.
Yes, so holding that, having that vision and holding that together. Not everybody in such a large country or even in a small country will all point their guns in the same direction.
But the spectrum of direction should be similar.
If the spectrum of direction is similar, we will outperform the rest of the world. And you can see what's happening. Without any internal threat, look at what has happened to Europe and now to the US. The political fragmentation is just stunning. So, you do need some sort of direction of...
Some excitement in the neighborhood is important, okay.
Yes. In fact, as they say, keeping your...
I want to come to Mr. Sood and then I want to turn to Mr. Panda and finally to Ms. Irani before I open it up to a few questions from the audience. I think we have a mic here. But Mr. Sood, you wanted to come?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what Sanjeev said. These are the perils of democracy. We are following one path which we think the entire country agrees upon. You have another election or another election, you have somebody else in power, he says, out with this. I won't follow this.
Mr. Panda, you're a keen student of Indian democratic journey and been a parliamentarian for so long. Is there a counter assessment to this? For example, some would argue that we've had fair degree of sturdy politics on some levels, on some planes, and that has perhaps served us well. Or do you also believe that our politics has been patchy in terms of chasing a big ticket vision?
No, we have had big ticket goals, but we haven't always had the confidence to really pursue them. In a different context, I have often used the phrase from diffidence to confidence. We became independent with the legacy of colonialism. Our idea of trade was East India Company. We never had, we had to barricade ourselves. It was only after the 90s and liberalization that you've seen the confidence come about in India, in business, in younger generation, in the IT world. But I think this applies as well to a national mood of confidence. This aspirational India is really less than a generation old, where anybody from any corner of the country, small town, feels that they can reach the highest levels, whether it is in sports, whether it is in entrepreneurship, whether it is in any field. So this is a new thing. Now, Sanjeev Sanyal made a very important point. We are really the only major example, where after independence we continued with the same old system. The US overthrew the British and the British system. The Chinese overthrew their colonial legacy and that legacy. They came up with an entirely new system. We continued with the same structures that the Government of India Acts established in 1919, 1934. And so we never had the confidence. So, for example, getting rid of Article 370, okay, was the only article that had the word temporary in front of it in the entire Constitution. Okay, so it was a clear indication that it had to go. It was exigencies of the situation during independence that it was a concession made for the time being. We couldn't do it until a certain degree of confidence was built up. We still have a number of directive principles where our founding fathers and mothers clearly thought this is what needs to be. There is no modern democracy in the world that doesn't have a uniform civil code. Now, we're still getting that confidence. We are still getting gradual buy-in into that vision of a Bharat where every Indian is treated equally as the Constitution guarantees, without separate laws, without separate... The way we function is like the Ottoman Empire used to function in the 16th century, where you had different laws for different communities. Now, we've come a long way, but we are still in the process of, a lot of the building blocks have been put into place. In the polity, you today see a situation where institutions are being undermined. The only other time you saw institutions being undermined was in the time surrounding the emergency.
The 70s.
Where people came out of the streets because the system had collapsed. Today that's not the case. And yet in the pursuit of power, people are undermining institutions. When you question the election commission, and there is a format that you can question, you can file the necessary papers, get them to respond to your allegations, but you won't do it. You're just doing it for a narrative building. This is where we have the problem of lack of internal coherence to the level that is required. We have come a long way, but we are still a work in progress.
Ma'am, you want to come in? You've heard everyone very patiently.
I think what is fundamental to the discourse today is exactly what Mr. Panda left the conversation on. How do you make a nation which has a civilizational heritage, which is both inspirational and aspirational, stop its ascent? It is by imploding an institution that assures democracy. The fact that irrespective of frameworks where the truth can come and engage with citizens at large, the fact that the power of narrative is such that it drowns that democratic sentiment and reality is something that needs to be noted. That there was a political reality with regards to Article 370, which we saw. But the other political reality is this, that you are a part of a democratic state, which also in some way tries to measure itself or compare itself to a state where there is a structure which is dependent at the mercy of one.
Correct.
You have not only political organizations that are fragmented in discourse, in narrative, in strategy, in states, but also some that have taken upon themselves to fight the vision of the center. So that being said, that in a country where we are still discussing how many hours a week one should work, we are also trying to say, how do we ascend to a particular economic maturity? So I believe that the battle is being fought on many fronts. One, that there is an attempt continuously to undermine the institutions that guarantee the very freedom that we enjoy. Technologies are being leveraged to add to the noise and drown realities. That there is on many fronts a war which is unsaid, which is still being fought every single day. There is some that takes the guise of tariff. There is some that takes the guise of narrative. And that when you're at an undeclared war on all fronts, how do you still protect the next generation that is to take the baton forward? As Gautam said, between Gautam and Mr. Sanyal, there is at least an agreement that this generation was to toil to bring it to a certain pass and the next generation is to take it forward. What is the next generation confronted with? You will be amazed, Samir, that there is a paper done by an academic in New York where the predominance of the research is to keep cell phones out of classrooms and youngsters because it is impacting their cognitive skills and their cognitive capacities to understand the very craft that a state is trying to disseminate through the education system. How much of the next generation is being impacted by that algorithm that will actually have the power to change the destiny of a society? True. We are caught now at a crossroads where we need that technology to unleash our economic promise, But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword where we have a young generation that will chat GPT a few things, not cognizant of the fact that there is an MIT study which says that it reduces your capacity to think
To think
independently.
and be analytical.
Become robots.
No, I think that's an important point. Let me take a few questions from the audience. We have a few mics here. We'll take 3. Okay, now let's go to actually the next gen here, and let's take 3 or 4 questions from this side. Let's give it to them, sir. I can see there's a age skew other than Miss Irani on this stage here. But go ahead, please. Introduce yourself and ask the question.
Hello everyone, I am Vishwa Patel and my question is to anyone can answer. The diplomacy of this era is driven by narratives and cultural influences than anything. And since 2014, there can be seen a great boost to influence of Indian culture at global level. The government is doing their part great, but what I want to know is that how do you think that people of India, by taking proud in their culture and in indigeneity, can drive this cultural diplomacy in the era of Instagram trends?
Okay, next question. I'll repeat them. I'm noting them down. Next question.
My name is Pranjal Singh. I'm a student of political science. My question is to Vikram sir. Sir, you have mentioned in the chapter Clash of Civilizations that there are parties who do not want the war that is going on between Hamas and Israel to end. So where do you think India's real interests lie? In prolonging the war so that we can use it as a bargaining chip for our deals with bilateral deals with Israel, or in ending it so that we can continue on our major projects like IMEC?
Okay.
So, good evening. My name is Nishit and I'm an engineer turned IR student. So my question is to Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal. Like you mentioned, the aspect of India finding its lost heritage, I would say, and lost identity. So my question is like how do you address the aspect of language, like when it's added? Like Ms. Irani mentioned China. So like in China we have a uniformity over language. So like how do you address this and how important is this?
Okay. I'll take one more and then I'll come back. Let me try and see. Okay. Can we take one from this side so that we have... Go ahead.
Congratulations on the book, Vikram sir. My question is
What's your
about
name?
Markandeya.
Okay. And where are you from, Markandeya?
I am a founder of an organization called Love, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question is, India being a developing country, how important is capitalism for its growth and to its counterparts in the East, that is, be it Singapore, be it China, be it Japan. India being a welfare state, how would it affect or help in the growth of India, be it in forms of subsidies or be it in forms of corporate bailouts? Maybe.
Thank you. I think these are 4 questions. Let's turn to them. One is people's role in the age of Instagram. How does the larger community of India participate in the great game, the never-ending game, and in the power games that are currently underway? How can people of India respond? The second question was Hamas in Israel and where does India's balance of interests lie? The third question was very important as far as I'm concerned, language and narratives, and I think that's a very important question and I'm going to put it to you. And finally, of course, developing country, capitalism, welfare state, and of course, what is going to induce growth. Maybe Sanjeev, you can take that. But let me start with Mr. Sood. You have a couple of questions. Role of people and of course, Hamas in Israel.
It's quite clear. We are not a party to it. There's nothing that we can do to prevent it or stop it. It's best to stay out and hope for the best. That's
No,
all.
okay, so we should seek peace. That should be our...
Yeah, it's peace. We always want peace. That's always our line. But to think that we are going to be able to solve
party
that
to it,
problem,
we should-
we are never not a party to it. What was the second question?
The second was the role of people in this, in the age of narratives and diplomacy through digital and technological means. How does a common Indian participate or strengthen an
I think that comes with more learning, more awareness of what the world really is. And I don't want to crow about it, but That's what the book is all
Correct.
about. That this is how the world functions. This is what they will do to you. You can say, you can cry from the treetops that I am a big dude now, but no, they don't want you there. So how are we going to do it as a collective effort? Okay. Oh yeah, we have to have some flagpole, some totem pole, or some icon who will put this together so that we have uninterrupted. It has to be totally uninterrupted, not stop, go 5 साल दूसरा करेगा, 5 साल पे पहला वाला आके करेगा. That won't work. You have to have consistency. You can have political differences. You can have this side of the median or that side, but your total Indian identity, Indian interest, Indian goals should remain the same. You go between the two parallel lines. Only then
and that, in a sense, is the role of the undergirding that holds the state up. It ensures continuity over time.
Guys like us.
Okay, I will not repeat what you said, but but I heard that. Okay, Mr. Panda, the role of people in the age of Instagram. How do students and all those who are engaged in, and by the way, there are more Indians engaged in Indian foreign policy than ever before, and this is also a recent phenomenon. So how do Indians participate, strengthen many of these conversations?
So this has to do with narratives. And, let's remember something, that for thousands of years, India was the go-to place for people from around the world, whether they wanted to pursue knowledge, whether they wanted to pursue their fortune, whether they wanted to pursue spirituality, and a variety of other aspirations. Now, I often use the phrase that we are undergoing a renaissance, much in the sense that the European Renaissance sort of re-established from the backwaters of Europe what had been originally developed civilizations in Greece and Rome. And in our Renaissance, we are recalling the great influence that India had. But we have to always remember that we can't be rooted in the past. The reason we had that influence is because we were at the cutting edge of science. We were at the cutting edge of
trade,
of spirituality, and all of that. Now, what is happening is today, with the democratization of information, we have these billions of people that are coming online and have views, but not necessarily informed views. You're right that today a much larger number of people are engaged with the India story. But huge numbers of people have opinions without, for example, all the youngsters that revere Che Guevara, and there's lots in India. How many do they know? How many of them know how complicit he was in torturing and killing large numbers of people? Okay? Now, this also relates.
But the T-shirt is very popular.
Yes, I used to have one when I was 20. Listen, I used to have one when I was 20, and this relates to the capitalism question. If you're not a socialist at 20, you don't have a heart. If you're still a socialist at 40, you don't have a brain.
Okay. Ms. Irani, language and narratives and the diversity of India may be a strength?
I think that I'll pick up from what Mr. Panda said. Is there any country that today is truly capitalist? There is a presumption when you speak about the US.
They all have industrial policies now.
And they have a government which is bought into a technology company
correct.
now.
It's a public sector undertakings everywhere.
So the issue is, what is the power of narrative? You were told that they are a very secular, forward-looking state. And we are very steeped in religion and the complexities of our diversity. If you take out a dollar bill today, you will see that in it, it says, "In God we trust." If you take any Indian note, you will not see any such proclamation.
Correct.
The Supreme Court of the US convenes for a red mass.
Correct.
The Indian Supreme Court does not convene for any religious practice.
And the upper house of the UK Parliament has priests from the Church of England.
So how much of that narrative now is set on old euphemisms, narratives, benchmarks, descriptions, definitions. And we are all running around in circles, trying to prove ourselves either different or, for that matter, accommodative of the same. Now, when it comes to the power of languages, it is interesting when I take a leaf from the ORF book. The head of AI of ORF is a PhD in literature, not a PhD in technology. Why? Because today technology is available predominantly in English, and we are a country which has close to 125 constitutionally recognized languages, 16,000 dialects. So when you talk about the capacity to consume technology but leverage it for larger good, including narrative, imagine that technology repurposed in languages of our people. How much of that strength then indigenously can be explored, not only to build capacity, but also unleash potential and bring new opportunities to a global economy. So I think that one, we have to be cognizant that we are walking on a double-edged sword, that we are having youngsters talk to a master spy about the power of Instagram and narratives, but also recognize that that is not a platform that we control as a sovereign state. So how much of our energies can go in exploring technologies to build potential, to build indigenous technology is something that needs a lot of consideration. When we speak about China, and I spoke about the $70 billion, according to Goldman Sachs, that they're about to spend on their data center, that comes in the guise of a Chinese company, but it is funded by the Chinese treasury.
Correct.
So how much of your treasury will be involved in exploring technologies of the future when you are trying to ensure that 800 million Indians are fed and given free food every month? That is the tightrope that India is walking.
Sanjeev?
So let me first say that when our India's debt to GDP ratio reaches the same level as that of the US, our notes will also say, "In God we trust." But meanwhile, let me say that people have this vision of capitalism as some pure supply-demand curve on
mercantilist transaction.
Yeah. But in fact, capitalism has always been a large range of things. And the same country may have different versions of it at different times. So you have state capitalism of, say, China. You have a certain kind of market capitalism of America of the 20th century. You have the colonial capitalism of Britain, and so on and so forth. So when you say capitalism, do be clear that it means many things at various different points in time. The alternatives to capitalism, however, haven't been great. Whether it's feudalism or various shades of communism, socialism, and we experimented with several of them ourselves. I, of course, did not have the misfortune of being a socialist at 20 because I grew up in communist-ruled Kolkata. But I did have the misfortune of spending great amount of time with people discussing many of these things, and where they had great opinions. As you said that Mr. Panda had mentioned that everybody had great engagement with foreign policy and many ideas without any particular knowledge of it. Let me say I have been facing that since childhood. And so nothing much has changed as far as I'm concerned. I personally think that essentially what is necessary is to be able to adapt according to the times. Yes, at certain points in time, you may need to bring back in certain areas industrial policy. In certain areas, you may need to actually even build a public sector enterprise. I mean, UPI, for example, is based on a public sector enterprise. But do not lose sight of the fact that when you do those kinds of things, there is a price you pay. For example, when you choose winners, do be clear, one, that you have put all your eggs in a certain basket. If that basket does well, great. But then there are other baskets you didn't put those resources into. So,
and make sure the winner doesn't run away with that basket.
That is one. Secondly, be clear that some of those eggs in the basket will fail. And then you cannot then call them, temples of modern India and carry on with them. You have to be willing to, break those and turn them into omelets.
Gautam, final intervention, because
can
I
I-
have a very important question I have to ask Mr. Sood.
Can I throw some cold water? Because it's very warm and fuzzy stuff going on out here. While the first half we were talking about threats and everything. So I think the first thing an average Indian can think about, and let's take Instagram, is life without Instagram. Are you willing to suffer? When there's a war, are you willing to accept body bags? When there is some other threat, some tariffs go up, are we willing to live with shortages? Are we willing to pay more prices? Or are we going to just succumb and say, no, let's bend and get our comforts? So I think this sacrifice, this sense of sacrifice, this sense of nationhood needs to come first. Insta will come and go. But how do you build your nation? I think that is something that we need to think about. And nobody's thinking, it's all well to say, we will defeat Pakistan, we will fight China. But suppose there is a Ukraine-Russia kind of eventuality, or a speculative, let's imagine it's happening. Are we willing to sacrifice? Or are we going to say, no, for the way we gave up terrorists to Pakistan?
We have to move from digital nationalism to real sacrifice.
To real, on street. So that's the first cold water and a sense of understanding of where we are coming from. And if we really want to grow, we need to be prepared to pay a price for it.
We
need
need blows to have the
sacrifice.
muscles to stand the pain. Okay.
The second point on capitalism, my favorite subject, is that I think the state is out of sync with the people today. The people I see want to set up startups, they want to set up new ideas, they have a dynamism that's I've never seen in a very long time, while the state is busy controlling them with the same colonial rules, the colonial infrastructure.
Yeah, you please read his book. I don't want to get started there, but
we discussed.
Gautam has written a book. It's called Jailed for Doing Business. Please read that. ORF published it. I'm promoting it.
So I think...
No, because it is an important book. I'm not kidding. There's such ridiculous laws that can put you in jail if you are a businessman.
And I think the state needs to meet the street in a positive way and allow the street to use capitalism and take our country forward.
The follow-up book is jailed for not reading it.
Mr. Sood, we are going to close with this question that I wanted to ask for the last 20 years since I first met you. And I've been wanting to ask that. I never used to come to your fourth. You used to be on the fourth floor? Remember you used to go on the fourth floor? I never used to come to that floor. Now you've moved to Bangalore. I have started sitting on the fourth floor. I want to know what's there.
Now he owns the fourth floor.
Now my question to you is, a serious question. Does the spy master ever retire?
No. One word answer.
So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding the spy master and his continued contribution to India. And please join me in thanking the wonderful panelists for their time this evening and their wonderful remarks. Do pick up a copy of this book and of the other two books as well. And please await his fourth in the series.